Hey guys, I'm Amberly.
And I'm Beth. Welcome to Southern Utah Museum of Art.
Our friends call us SUMA.
This semester we are excited to be exhibiting Cowboys and Indians by Andy Warhol and Myth of the West by Billy Schenck.
Andy Warhol was a leader of American pop art. Pop art is based on a modern popular culture and mass media, especially as a critical or ironic comment on the traditional fine art values. Pop art is an art movement that originated in the 1950s, using commercial imagery and advertising methods as inspiration and often as tools to criticize social norms. Cowboys and Indians was Warhol's last project before his death in 1987.
So Andy Warhol inspired many artists, including Billy Schenck, and Schenck is considered to be one of the original founders of Western pop art. And his style, he transforms images into flat, sharply defined, simplified areas of color and stylized patterns.
Here at SUMA, we recognize and use the terms Native Americans or Indigenous peoples when not referring to the exhibition title of this show. Let's go ahead and look at the first Warhol. This first screen print is of Kachina dolls. What's a screen print, Beth?
So a screen print is a type of print made using mesh, ink, and a squeegee or scraper. Fabric and paper are the most commonly screen printed surfaces, but with specialized ink, it is also possible to print on wood, metal, plastic, and even glass. Why do you think Warhol chose to include these dolls in this collection?
The ever-growing number of Indigenous objects in museums and images in media resulted in the turning of Indigenous culture into commodities to be bought, sold, and traded, oftentimes erasing their intrinsic value. Objects such as these Kachina dolls, pottery, and blankets became longed after not only by archaeologists, but collectors such as Andy Warhol. When creating these prints, Warhol reinterpreted these objects, sometimes to the point of changing their original meaning. What did you like about this piece, Beth?
So I really like the bright colors that Warhol uses, this purple and orange, and then the white outlines all around. I think that's an interesting choice. And then that there's two prints of the same doll, one with color and one that's not colored. So that's an interesting pairing. So let's move on to the next piece. So this is a print of Geronimo. And Geronimo is a Spanish name, but his real name translates into one who yawns. And he was born in 1823 in the band of Chiricahua Apaches in the upper Gila River Valley. And he's a prominent Native American figure, leader, and medicine man from a band of the Apache tribe. And he was highly regarded and respected in his community, led many raids and fights against the Mexican and U.S. military campaigns in the Southwest. But in 1886, he surrendered to the American forces. And this picture, this is actually from a famous photograph taken of Geronimo on an Apache Indian reservation in Arizona. And Warhol used a reproduction published in a mass-produced newspaper, and we can kind of see the halftone dots that would have been in the newspaper. You can see these dots in the face, the head, and the shirt. So Amberly, what is your favorite part about this print?
For me, I really like the fine details in the dots and the outlines and the bright colors. I think it really makes this piece, and the expression in his eyes and his mouth and the way that it all comes together. So let's go ahead and move on to the next one. This is Annie Oakley, nicknamed Little Sure Shot. She was one of the most famous performers in Buffalo Bill's Wild West show. One of the most popular performers in Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, Oakley toured nationally and internationally as a sharpshooter from the early 1880s to the early 1900s. After a serious injury, she began an acting career in the stage play called The Western Girl. She continued to set shooting records later in her life and was an advocate for women's rights her whole life. In both life and death, Oakley became a globally recognized symbol of the American West. The pop color palette of this particular piece definitely shows off Annie Oakley as a pop culture icon and a historical iconic figure.
Let's move on to another historical figure. So this is Teddy Roosevelt, and this image comes from an 1898 photograph of him in his Rough Rider uniform. So you can see the hat and the jacket. In the portrayal of Teddy Roosevelt, Warhol prints the young Roosevelt in dark black ink, and the outfit, the hat and the jacket, they stand out more than the man himself. He He's wearing sky blue, indigo, laced with these yellow and red etchings. This is the darkest work in the Cowboys and Indians collection, but Roosevelt is still a clearly identifiable figure.
I really love the way that Andy Warhol was able to criticize pop culture and also allow audiences to draw their own conclusion. And with that, let's go ahead and look at the last figure, Sitting Bull. This portrait of Sitting Bull pays homage to the hero of the Battle of Little Bighorn. The vivid coloring of Sitting Bull's face and the light highlights that outline his shape gives the traditional subject a modern twist.
So I think it's interesting the colors that Warhol used, the red and the blue. It kind of reminds me of the Oakley print and some of the other prints, where the faces are not necessarily natural colors. It's more of these crazy explorational colors. So let's move on to our Schenck works. So this piece is called No Problema, and it is a still from the film A Fistful of Dollars by Sergio Leone, and it features Clint Eastwood. Schenck riffed on the dot screen technique, varying in size and spacing the representative halftone screening used in almost all mass printing of black and white photographs. This fluctuating intensity of the dot shades and cools the very hot orange color that fills the canvas. The color itself attracts viewers to the painting, where they may feel the sensation of heat, but it's not aggressive like if it was bright red.
I really love the colors of this piece, as well as the fact that it's Clint Eastwood, because can't go wrong with Clint Eastwood. And with that, let's go and move on to our next piece called Clay Hill Descansos. Crosses are prominent features of Christian cemeteries and roadside memorials, also called descansos in Spanish. Unlike a gravestone, a descanso commemorates a site where someone died suddenly or unexpectedly away from home. Clay Hill Descansos is rendered with ominous clouds behind a sunlit cross, the light symbolizing protection against the advancing dark. Flowers flank the cross as a gentle gesture of remembrance and of the continuing cycle of life.
So one of my favorite things about this piece is it contrasts with a lot of the other pieces in the exhibition. There's no people, it's very still. It's also very dark compared to some of the more bright pieces full of movement. So let's move on to the next one. So this painting is called The Last Sunset, and it portrays this stereotypical image of the rugged cowboy and his girl in this big romantic scene. The romantic staging and presence of a sidearm announced that the source material for this painting was a Western movie still. Viewers are left to wonder what the couple has said. What are they thinking? Some of Billy Schenck's new artworks came with thought balloons and captions to amplify his interpretations in the 1980s. An avid reader of comic books and inspired by the success of Roy Lichtenstein's work, Schenck superimposed text over images through captioning, dialogue, and thought balloons. These commentaries are alternatively humorous, ironic, nostalgic, and sardonic.
I personally love the romantic and romanticized portrayal of Western love in this piece, and it could even be an old school movie poster. And speaking of movies, let's go look at a piece with a little bit more action to it. This is called Halftone Flats. It's an early example of Schenck's work using the halftone dot method on a rather large 87 by 70 inch work, hand painting two Arizona cowboys roping a steer in the foreground with a red rock mesa backdrop and a giant cumulus thundercloud forming above. The effect is quite different from the 36 by 36 inch tightly cropped square portraits Warhol produced.
So my favorite part about this piece is definitely these dots throughout, especially in the sky. They're so big, and I think it would have taken a really long time to paint each one, and it kind of makes the entire thing look like a very, very big comic book page, but it's just so huge. So let's move on to our last piece. So this painting, Jeff Stared, portrays a cowboy seated on a rock out in the Canyonlands holding a Winchester rifle on his lap. The rifle suggests the long-range nature of the scene where Jeff stared into the passing of the West. The scene is nostalgic, with the cowboy hero deep in thought, stunned by the passage of time. The figure is evocative, appearing wistful with a sentimental longing for a period or a place with happy personal associations.
We hope you enjoyed your tour and that hopefully you learned a little bit of something about the Wild West.
Thanks for hanging out with us.
Bye!